It was only a month ago, France's president was in Washington trying to convince Donald Trump to stay in the Iran nuclear deal. Now, the French president has landed in Russia, a long-scheduled meeting to discover the latest surprise out of Washington. After ripping up the Iran deal, Donald Trump sending a letter to Kim Jong-un canceling his June 12th summit with the North Korean leader in Singapore. Will Trump's madman theory of bargaining prove his detractors wrong and reap results? Or should we brace ourselves for a bumpy ride as this old world order gets rocked to the core? North Korea, Iran, trade. Where do Trump's deeds and statements leave Macron and Europe? We're going to hear Macron's reaction and that of Vladimir Putin when they address reporters. The U.S. decision to walk away from the Iran deal and impose fresh sanctions on those that do business with Tehran, just one of the aspects they'll be talking about. Of course, North Korea, the other one. Today in the France 24 debate, after Iran, North Korea, joining us here from Washington, Kurt Mills, foreign affairs reporter at the National Interest, contributor to The Spectator in the UK. Thank you for being with us. Here in the studio, we're joined by France 24's Douglas Herbert, joining us as well. Anton Kozlov, associate professor at the American Graduate School, and journalist and commentator Dmitry Dekochko. How are you, sir?
Hello.
The France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag F24debate. No sooner had the North Korean vice foreign minister branded U.S. Vice President Mike Pence, quote, a political dummy, that the White House had downgraded Kim's status back to Rocket Man. In a letter to Kim, Donald Trump stating, you talk about your nuclear capabilities, but ours are massive and powerful, and I pray to God they will never have to be used. Trump following up those strong words when he spoke a short while ago at the White House.
I've spoken to General Mattis and the Joint Chiefs of Staff and our military, which is by far the most powerful anywhere in the world, that has been greatly enhanced recently, as you all know, is ready if necessary. Likewise, I have spoken to South Korea and Japan, and they are not only ready should foolish or reckless acts be taken by North Korea, but they are willing to shoulder much of the cost in operations if such an unfortunate situation is forced upon us.
Should we be worried, Anton Kozlov?
Well, if you ask me, I think Trump is bluffing, and so is Kim. I think they're both bluffing. We know that Trump, in fact, first Kim turned this crisis into something that Trump had to deal with directly. Trump agreed to negotiate. They both actually agreed. Now there is an issue of American and South Korean military exercise, and so there's some other issues, but I don't think it's something that is going to turn into a serious military confrontation of any sort.
All right, we've had those words so strong that we've had a Pentagon spokesperson coming out in the past hour, Dmitry Dekochko, saying there's no heightened state of vigilance. It's the normal state of vigilance that we maintain. Does that reassure you?
I also think there is a good part of bluff in that. I'm neither afraid by a conflict with North Korea. North Korea has destroyed three test polygons yesterday or today, nuclear. So it was what was asked by South Korea and Americans. Of course, you cannot treat a country like Trump has tried to do. I mean, you cannot dictate to a country which is very attached to its sovereignty. Just you have to destroy everything, otherwise we will have to apply to the Libyan scheme. Of course, North Korea couldn't accept that, and of course, but I don't think there is a conflict which is in preparation just right now.
North Korea couldn't accept that, but it's Donald Trump who's hit the pause button on this summit.
No, I'm not going to mince the words here. I believe that regardless of the spin to the contrary by the White House right now, I do believe that this is a fiasco for Donald Trump. And I believe that it is an inevitable outcome from a White House that essentially went into what is an extremely complicated bit of diplomacy, geopolitical diplomacy here, without, and I'm not overstating it by saying without a clue. When I say that, I mean it literally, because there are not to mention his top tier of advisors, which is now a very hawkish tier. John Bolton, National Security Advisor, Mike Pompeo is the new Secretary of State, very, very hawkish, belligerent in their foreign policy approach. But even below that, in the second tier of people within the State Department, whose ranks are still depleted after Rex Tillerson's reign, they don't really have any North Korea experts. The one guy who was considered their top closest advisor had left about little over a month ago. He resigned. And the issue is that they were really relying and riding on and fueling their entire policy by bluster, but bluster coupled with ignorance of North Korea, of its motivations, of its leaders' psychology, as well as the past history of negotiations. It's a toxic combination, and I believe that the administration is trying to do what any administration in this situation would do right now. It's scrambling to save face and to pass the onus of the blame to the North Koreans.
All right, South Korea's president also weighing in, saying, I'm very perplexed. It's very regrettable that the North Korea-U.S. summit will not be held June 12th when it was scheduled to be held. Now, the U.S. Secretary of State earlier telling Congress it's not just about strong rhetoric out of Pyongyang.
I regret the statements that the North Koreans have made over the past few days, and the fact that we've not been able to conduct the preparation between our two teams that would be necessary to have a chance for a successful summit.
Anton Kozlov, could be North Korea's fault for not, answering back, getting the logistics ready. And there's this phrase at the end of that letter where Trump says, if you change your mind having to do with this most important summit, please do not hesitate to call or write.
Well, unfortunately, the President of the United States is not a very good either diplomat or political expert, negotiator, or whatever. I think it is in this sense, Kim is certainly a more capable person, it seems to me, than Donald Trump. Now, I think Kim is playing his game. He's not a democratically elected leader, so he doesn't have to answer to anyone. So he will do what he feels he should be doing, and it's up to the United States and to Trump and his advisors to find some sort of strategy to bring a consensual resolution to this crisis.
All right, let's cross now to Kurt Mills of the magazine The National Interest. Thanks for joining us here in the France 24 debate. Kurt, I have to tell you, the panel here in Paris has not been kind to Donald Trump after the announcement of the cancellation of that summit. It's appearing to them a little bit amateurish. Your thoughts?
Well, this is a president that flouts the advice of professional advisors and the foreign policy establishment. So I think we saw this morning as true to form. However, he thinks that this could potentially be a negotiating tactic. So you ask high, you sell low, you meet somewhere in the middle. This is vintage Trump. This is vintage Trump, the real estate wheeler dealer. I think what we see today should be no surprise.
Should be no surprise. So for you, it's part of, again, what Richard Nixon once called the madman theory of diplomacy, where you act a little bit crazily to catch your interlocutors off guard?
I think he's acting a little more than a little bit crazy, but yes, I think Trump is certainly the heir to Nixon in more ways than one, and I think he's certainly at least a fellow traveler of the so-called madmen theory.
So will it work?
I don't think this is scuttled. You have to realize that the channels between Washington and Pyongyang are remarkably small, tight, only a few people involved in them, and a lot of people are in the dark. Essentially, both sides had shown today that they are essentially not ready for this summit. You hear reports out of North Korea that Kim Jong-un is afraid to leave North Korea because his government will fall to some kind of coup, and Trump is plainly not ready to come to the table because the people in his White House don't agree with how to approach it. Trump, I think, wants a deal. I think his Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, is the closest ideologically to him. Also, Mr. Pompeo plainly has designs on higher office down the line and would also happily be the signatory to a major deal. But people like Vice President Pence, an ostensible rival, and National Security Advisor Bolton, the cabinet's uber hawk, are way more skittish on a deal. It's been unclear from the administration whether or not denuclearization is a red line. So would Trump accept any deal in the sense that, like, okay, we're going to get rid of half our stockpile, we're going to move there by 2030, or is complete and irrevocable denuclearization the only pretense for discussions? That's been unclear from the top 4 guys out of the White House.
I want to pick up, Doug, on something that Dmitry Dukochko said earlier, and that is a little bit the timeline of the past 24 hours, because you had on Wednesday, in the end, the invitation extended to these South Korean journalists to go and witness the dismantling of this nuclear site.
An already disused nuclear site that had not really been operational for quite a while, really.
Nonetheless, invited along for the show and tell session here. And then so it seemed as though
this is where you got it wrong.
that things were going like it was back on the rails. And then the letter out of Washington, our sole correspondent saying he was a little perplexed by the.
I would take exception, I guess, François, to your use of "it seemed as if." That's where we fall into trouble here, because it seemed to whom. And I think this is where all these talks went off the rails, because, you know, the whole issue of denuclearization, everyone had a totally different worldview of what that meant. And I think that neither side was really reading the other. If either side was reading one side better, it was probably North Korea reading Trump a lot better than Trump was reading North Korea. Denuclearization, we've talked about this, we've reported this. Nuclear weapons, you don't have to be a nuclear scientist to know this. You don't even have to be a North Korea expert to know this. They are in the DNA of the North Korean regime. They are the raison d'etre of the North Korean regime. Kim Jong-un has not beaten around the bush on this. He has made it absolutely clear. It is in the North Korean revised constitution from 2012 that nuclear weapons are absolutely essential. Yes, would they like to one day denuclearize? Fine, but that's only at a point at which they have absolute security guarantees and they are convinced that there is no threat from hostile elements from without, i.e. the United States. So in a weird way, yes, he's a brutal, you could argue, murderous dictator of a very insular, erratic regime. That I'm not an apologist for Kim Jong-un, but he has, in many respects, been much more consistent in his approach here. He never, ever said that he was going to abandon his nuclear weapons. I think a lot of the error here was in this misinterpretation or wishful thinking, perhaps, on the part of a White House that didn't really understand the motives of this regime.
All right. Again, we were mentioning the South Korean president saddened by what's happened. We've been seeing strong reactions on Capitol Hill from the opposition, the Democrats. Dmitry Dukochko, worldwide, the street credibility of Donald Trump after his announcement on the cancellation of this June 12th summit.
I think Iran is much worse for the credibility than North Korea. You know, I think really. That is not a surprise, in fact, because, yes, it is true, North Korea will not accept Trump to dictate her or to abandon the nuclear weapons, of course. And, you know, I'm not sure what the South Koreans think very deep inside. It's about the United States, of course, but historically it is also about Japan.
Right.
And when the United States are asking Japan to make rearmament, to go back to arms, and at the same time they ask Koreans to disarm. It is very contradictory for the Asian history. And Koreans, you know what is the relationship between Koreans and Japanese. It's a very difficult relationship. You must not play with that. So, of course, his credibility as a diplomat does not exist really. He's a good businessman. He's not a diplomat. We know that. There is other tactics. Here's a poker game.
So it won't change. It won't change perception of Donald Trump when it comes to Korea. But you're saying the perception of Donald Trump has changed with Iran.
I'm sure it has. Yes, even with Europe.
Dmitry Dikochko?
Well, first of all,
sorry, Anton Kozlov. Excuse me.
I don't think Donald Trump had any credibility to begin with. So therefore, he's got nothing really to lose in this sense. Now, I don't think this North Korean affair will hurt him that much, because basically what it was played on fear. Because when North Korea demonstrated its nuclear missile capabilities, everyone got scared that there's going to be a war, Guam, Japan, and so on and so forth. And then Trump started to negotiate, and there was even a talk about giving him a Nobel Prize for Peace, right? So now, no Nobel Prize for Peace. But what does he care? And what do we care about that? Not that much. I think Iran affair is certainly more serious, because what we're seeing here is a real geopolitical game, very serious games with a lot of unknown elements and a lot of players. And in this sense, whether he's going to be able to corner Iran, and with Iran, we're talking about, it's not just Iran, it's also about Russia, it's about Syria, it's about that part of the world which does not agree, but it's also about Saudi Arabia, it's about the Sunni states of the Gulf.
Dollar, extra jurisdiction of the United States.
Whatever, the Pax Americana, so to say, which is collapsing for the past, I would say, since the war in Iraq.
Kurt Mills, the Pax Americana, a further sign of its collapsing, America's role as the world's, peacemaker, or if you will, the world's gendarme?
Well, I don't know if it's a collapse. You have to remember this is a White House that doesn't necessarily believe in that. We had a president who, as a candidate, vociferously criticized his Republican predecessor, George W. Bush, and also criticized his successor, Barack Obama, the safeguarder of the liberal international order. People in Trump's orbit, including former chief strategist Steve Bannon, plainly don't believe in the liberal international order. They see this as a sort of return to 19th century great power. But the idea that the president and America don't have any power or credibility, I think is, plainly not true. The world is obsessed with Trump. This country is obsessed with Trump. We hang on, for good or ill, what he's going to do in the morning. And so I think America still has a tremendous amount of say going forward, potentially indefinitely. What you would see, I just wanted to respond to one of the other panelists' points, is that I do agree that I think the Iran situation is potentially more dire than the North Korean situation. Regime change, or some sort of regime change operation in Tehran, is amply more likely than a corollary operation in Pyongyang, in my assessment.
All right, and when we come back here in the France 24 debate, we're going to see how the rest of the world is recalibrating, in particular to that decision by Donald Trump to walk away from the Iran deal, in particular as France's President Emmanuel Macron is in St. Petersburg to meet Vladimir Putin. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.
You're watching France 24. I'm Marco, and these are the main world news headlines. Donald Trump has cancelled the summit with Kim Jong-un. The US president says it's a tremendous setback for North Korea and the world. Russia shot down the MH17 flight, killing almost 300 people. A Dutch investigation has pinpointed the source of the missile that struck the aircraft over eastern Ukraine in 2014. Ireland's to vote on its abortion laws. Campaigners want a relaxation of some of the most strict laws in the world on a woman's right to choose. The Oscar winner Morgan Freeman has apologized after a report of multiple sexual harassment accusations. He's the latest Hollywood figure to face allegations of misconduct in the Me Too era. Those are the main stories, so we'll stay with us throughout the night. For now, it's back to the debate and Monsieur Picard.